Hi, it's Amy Shaw here. I actually had a video request. It's taken me a little bit of time to get to this one, but the request was to talk about raising kids with special needs. Now, when I say special needs, what I specifically actually mean is kids that have various types of psychic abilities. So it is a good topic. I'm a mom. I've successfully raised 3 kids into adulthood. My youngest is almost 23 years old. He has autism. I have a daughter who's almost 26 and then a son who's almost 29. So I'm also a grandma. So yeah, I have a 5-year-old, almost 6-year-old granddaughter and a 1.5, almost 2-year-old grandson. So yep, I have that experience under my belt. And you know, obviously raising children, they all have various gifts and abilities. You know, these things tend to run in families. So there's a genetic component to it. There's sort of an ancestral lineage component to it. And, you know, I think as a whole, the planet is just, we're evolving. As a human species, we're evolving. And, you know, people are coming in and earlier on are getting activated and awakening and realizing that, you know, that they have abilities as people become more aware of what those actually are and how to use them. And so this is a legitimate thing, and it can still be a challenge because we're in that transition phase of our development as a whole, as humanity as a whole. And so definitely in our culture, we haven't really had room for that. You know, we sort of flirted with it. We've called it a parascience, you know, parapsychology or a parascience, you know, psychic phenomena. It's definitely been studied in academic arenas, but, you know, a lot of it's been viewed with suspicion. And, you know, culturally in our rational materialist culture, we just haven't really embraced the idea that people can have these type of abilities and use them. So because we're in that culture, just like with the shamanic lineage, it's sort of broken, and we don't have a lot of mentors. We don't have a lot of people that we can actually like reach out to and get guidance and assistance from. So it does make it definitely challenging as more and more parents are finding that they're having kids that have these incredible abilities, incredible insights, you know, knowledge and wisdom, you know, at younger ages, and you know, it's mind-blowing for a lot of parents. They don't know what to do with it, how to handle it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit. I'm not really sure what's going to come out of it today. When I think about it, the first thing I think about is, man, we live in this culture that is so sorcerous. It's full of sorcery everywhere. Every time you turn on the TV, it comes even through the most innocent Disney movie that you can imagine. The level of sorcery is so profound. It's just everywhere. It's in music videos. It's in music. It's in the shows we watch on TV. It's on, you know, everything that we're exposed to on the internet. And I just found out the other day about this YouTube thing that's going around, you know, with young kids. They're calling it Elsagate now. And, you know, it's involving like these Play-Doh videos that the younger kids are watching. And, you know, just sort of this agenda that people are trying to figure out what's really going on. There's something definitely weird and fishy going on with that whole thing. And it made me literally sick to my stomach because my granddaughter, she's 5, and you know, her mom gives her a tablet once in a while to kind of, you know, keep her focused and entertained, you know, in moments. And that's the first thing she wants to do is get on YouTube and watch those Play-Doh videos. I personally always thought they were a little bit creepy. Now I know why. You know, and I was just kind of looking over her shoulder to make sure what she's watching isn't, you know, blatantly inappropriate. But I wasn't like sitting alongside her, literally watching every second of it to, you know, feel into it and caress out the finer sort of energies and messages that are being sent. And now that this is coming out, this whole Elsagate thing, I'm really sick to my stomach about it because I'm like, oh God, I just don't even have any idea what she's exposed to. And so raising kids in this day and age is even 10 times fold what it was when my kids were being raised in the 80s and the 90s, late 80s, up through the 90s and the 2000s. You know, even, you know, me, I just turned 45. I'm not that old, you know, and even in my era in the 70s, I mean, you know, the biggest threat we had was, you know, getting abducted off our bicycles, you know, while we were riding our bikes out in front of our yard. And that really was so rare, it hardly even ever happened. I mean, and if anything, that was a fear that was instilled in us, that fear of crime that wasn't really even based on actual reality or statistics. But, you know, that was the biggest thing. That was the biggest threat when I was a kid growing up, was that. And this idea that, you know, people started, you know, putting weird stuff, razor blades and drugs and stuff in the Halloween candy, right? I mean, everybody remembers that, the Tylenol scare, you know, which totally changed the culture, right, of how medications, over-the-counter medications are packaged and you know, safety handled and that stuff. So I'm getting off track, but, you know, I'm just to say that the world now is a completely different place. And the threats coming at our kids now are completely different. And this goes to parenting overall. In general, you know, regardless of if you think your child has, you know, some type of special abilities or not, parenting in general, we just have to really, really guard our kids. But I think that, you know, when kids have special needs, you know, they're more sensitive, or they have certain gifts and they don't, you know, really know how to use them, these things get tied to our sense of ourself. They get tied to our emotional, you know, traumas, everything that we, you know, we're exposed to and facing, they get tied to that. And, you know, it's I'm going to go to this place and I know people don't like it, and you know, here I am with my Christian CD in the background. So, hi Dave, I know it really irritates you and your atheism. You're going to make fun of me for listening to Christian music, but you should check out Day of Fire. They're really good. Anyways, you know, I'm going to go to this place and I know that people are resistant to it. I know that there's, you know, a lot of new age sort of backlash coming out about the whole idea of dualism and, you know, the darkness serves the light and all this concept. And there's truth to all of that. But at the end of the day, there's a universal truth, and that is that intention matters. No matter what, intention matters, and we cannot become complacent and just lay down and accept, you know, this darkness, this malevolent intent, you know, and just say, oh, it's all for our good. Because, you know, the reality is the demonic forces, they're sadists, they're masochists. They have a desire to hurt, maim, kill, destroy, squash out, stamp out, just and so we can't be passive of that. We can't be passive and just say, oh, well, the darkness is serving the light. We are in warfare. This is my reality. Spiritual warrior is a big part of my shamanic facet. I've experienced it my entire life from the time I was born, that sense of being pursued, you know, by this very malevolent force that was seeking to kill me. And I still experience that. So, and that comes through in very subtle ways in our culture, but it's pervasive. Even though it's subtle and sort of, you know, seems somewhat benign, it's the pervasive bombardment of it that can get our kids. And so I think as parents, we really have to be mindful of this. If you're raising kids that have some sort of sensitivities, you really have to be astute and paying attention, I mean, in the utmost highest degree, to what they're being exposed to. And so the biggest challenge, I think, in raising kids that have those kind of abilities and skills, and it's hard for me to talk about this generically, because I think that each specific skill, whether it's clairvoyance or clairaudience or claircognizance or telekinesis or, you know, all these other different things that, you know, people can experience, I think each thing is going to have a different approach to it. So I'm just talking generally, you know, kind of globally, generically, towards parents in general, and then towards specifically parents that are raising kids that have one or many, you know, gifts on this spectrum. You know, you really have to be on par and paying attention, because what's happening is a lot of kids are actually getting activated or shamanically initiated from these shows, these anime shows that they're watching on Netflix, you know, that are talking about powers and chakras, and, you know, kids are absorbing this. They're absorbing this information. It's high occult wisdom and knowledge. And when I say occult, you know, I want to be careful with that, because I am not a Christian. I don't self-identify as a Christian, but I have a very strong Christian background. So I understand the Christian mentality. And a lot of Christian people, they're running around sort of paranoid, you know, making all these conspiracy theory videos about, oh, the Illuminati, and they're tying it all to the occult. And again, there is some truth in that. But what occult really means is hidden knowledge. And we have to consider that this knowledge has been hidden and kept and hoarded for a reason. You know, it's not that it's so-called bad inherently. It's actually neutral. It's neutral. It's neither good nor bad, but it can be used for good and for bad. Well, the bad guys wanted to use it for themselves. And so somewhere along in history, they started hoarding it and tamping it down and making it, bad for other people to know it. And when one group of people possesses a power and ability over another group, that's what it comes down to. It's a power and control struggle. So a lot of occult knowledge is not inherently, although the church will tell you, oh, it's demonic. It's not inherently demonic. It's actually neutral. It's neither good or bad. It's that the bad guys have hijacked it and hoarded it for themselves. And they have generation after generation after generation handed down and maintained this occult knowledge and used it against people who have lost it, who were persecuted for having it, and then, over the lineage lost that knowledge. So then what's happening is all this occult knowledge is coming out, in our culture, through the cartoons, the music, all that stuff. And the kids are absorbing that. So it's activating them in a way. They're getting high occult knowledge, but they have no lineage. They have no base. They have no foundation for it, except for this sorceress culture. So in effect, what it's trying to do is turn all of our kids into sorcerers, working for the dark side. Ego development is foundational to, being, in integrity, to having a strong practice, magical practice, shamanic practice, whatever you want to call it, psychic practice, being able to do that with integrity. And the only way to do that with integrity is to build a strong foundation of ego, to know thyself, and to be able to self-examine and understand one's own hidden motives. The shadow isn't just the things that I know about myself that I'm keeping secret from other people. It's the things I don't know about myself that I'm keeping secret from myself. That's really what the shadow is. So it's a total lack of awareness of self that creates the shadow. Once I become aware of it myself and I witness it within myself, and it's no longer in my shadow, it's moved into my consciousness. Just because I'm not telling it to other people, all my dirty secrets to other people outside, that doesn't make it the shadow. That just makes it the secret that I keep, okay? And so that's the thing, I think, that parents nowadays are very, very challenged with, is all that shadow work from very, very early on. To sort of get your child in the mode of being able to self-examine, and that self-examination hygiene, shall we call it, is an imperative part of not only building a strong ego, but keeping oneself clear of the sorcery. And being able to take this higher occult knowledge and transmute it and re-implement it out in a way that's benevolent, that, seeks to bring peace on the earth, that seeks to encourage human beings, that seeks to, bring about a positive human evolution instead of death and destruction, sadism and masochism and all these things. Because what happens is that even though, you might be raising your kids in a really good, family, and here's our morals, here's our values, that's all great. But the thing of it is, they're sitting in front of TV, and they're sitting in front of the computer, and they're sitting in front of, all these electronic objects, and it's coming at them constantly. The video games, they're terrible. The video games are like the worst in terms of like the amount of high occult knowledge that they're pushing out to kids without a context, without the appropriate context. And so they're getting this through this, and then they're over here, watching this video where this is happening, and then here's the cultural context. It's just a very giant, like, witch's brew of sorcery that's happening in our culture. Such a challenge. So the thing I have to say really about raising kids with special gifts is that you just have to be so tuned in every single day, checking in with your kid. Hey, what's going on today? And talking about it. I think once they get a certain age, 11-ish, 12-ish, especially girls, boys maybe a little bit later, they don't want to talk to you anymore. They don't want to have parents anymore. But I think, if they're freakish in any way, if they've identified that they have some sort of special skill or something different that other people aren't talking about, they might not necessarily talk about those things with their peers. Their peers are talking about, boys and girls and, social things, and, they're coming awake sexually and socially and all of that, and that's sort of where their head's at. So they might not be talking about, hey, I can read people's minds, you know, even though they're exposed to a lot of that stuff now, you know, in the literature, Twilight and all these, you know, Harry Potter and all these, you know, series that are coming out for kids, even though that's made normal in a lot of these, you know, in the actuality of our culture, it's still not really considered normal, you know. And so I imagine kids aren't really freely talking about that as much, you know. I mean, one child might say it to another child, hey, is this going on with you? And the other child might say, no, you're kind of a freak. And then it just shuts that child down. If that's your child, then I just want to encourage you that even though if they get to that place where it's difficult for them to talk, you know, to the parents, I still think that being open and just, you know, letting them know it's okay to talk about that specific thing is super important, because if that's the only avenue that they have to talk about that is you, then they're going to be much more open to talking about that. And in a way, that's how you start paving the road for the friendship phase of the relationship, which will come later on in life. You know, obviously when they're still children, they need parents. They don't need friends. So they need structure, they need discipline, they need elderhood, guidance, all these things, you know. And they still need these things in adulthood, but the relationship changes, the power structure changes, and you have to evolve into earning the right to be on their council. You know, earning the right to sit at the table of their council. And so, you know, that's a process that takes work in the relationship, you know, and the seeds for that actually start in that adolescent phase, as they start individuating and wanting to have less and less and less to do with you as a parent. That's when the seeds are really laid, that are going to later on, a decade later, sort of flourish into the relationship from, you know, adult child with parent. So if you can hang on during those years and just keep open to talking about, not force the issue, but just let them know, hey, I know that you have this going on, and, you know, I'm open to talking about that as you're interacting with your peers, how this particular gift is affecting you. You know, and when they're little, just encouraging them. I know it can be really scary, especially if you haven't done a lot of psychic development yourself. It's overwhelming. Like, I don't know how to handle this kid. You know, this kid doesn't even need development. They're just coming in full force, and I don't know how to handle that. I know that can definitely be a challenge. And it's really hard for me to talk specifics in just a general video. So I'm always available if you want to reach out to me. I would love to hear about your situation and, you know, the child that you've been blessed with, and, you know, to work with you on that. But otherwise, I can only just encourage you to, you know, try not to instill fear in them. Try not to, you know, make them feel like they're freakish or they're different. Normalize it as much as you can, and talk about it as much as you can. You know, and talk about it in terms of like scenarios, you know, scenarios of what's happening at school or what could potentially happen, so that you're modeling for them the appropriate way to use their gift. I mean, I certainly think, you know, in terms of like psychic ability, psychic intrusion is a big thing, and that's actually a form of sorcery. So using your psychic ability to your own advantage, you know, to psychically spy on somebody, or, you know, to get information for yourself, or, you know, and I could see this being a thing even with peers, you know, pressuring you, you know, oh, I want to know if Johnny likes me, you know, and, you know, your child being sort of put in a predicament of, you know, using that skill and that gift to sort of psychically spy, to, you know, then give information about, you know, that's a level of sorcery. And that goes into that territory I was talking about at the beginning of integrity, you know, and instilling the need, you know, that instilling that foundation of integrity and practice is essential. It has to start very, very early on. And kids need to understand the difference between sorcery and, you know, a true benevolent implementation of the gift. Why we're giving these gifts, and how we use them, you know, in an appropriate way, and maintain our integrity about ourselves, while not, you know, squashing it down or tamping it down or creating fear, creating an environment that fosters the growth of it, the development of it, but bringing in, you know, that parental foundation of, you know, the integrity and the structure and all those things. So it's a challenge. If you're raising a kid like that, let me tell you, my hat's off to you. I know firsthand what a challenge that is. I mean, I'm still, you know, even with my adult children, you know, struggling through with trying to, you know, help them develop themselves. So you know, it's a challenge, and I just want to acknowledge you today and let you know that I know, and I hope I answered as much as I could, you know, just throwing out this generic, you know, talk about parents raising kids. I hope that I answered you with some amount of insight, and as I said, you can always get a hold of me. I would love to, you know, develop a personal relationship with you and you know, speak to it more personally in your life. If you have questions or comments, please, as always, leave them down below the video. And thank you always for watching my channel and for your encouraging remarks. If you want to get a hold of me privately, you can send me a message at Amy K. Shaw. That's AIMEE Shaw. It's ShamanicServices at amykshaw.com. And then you can reach me on Facebook at, you know, Facebook/ShamanicServices, or message me through Google, or leave a comment on the channel. There's a lot of different ways that you can get a hold of me. So have a great day, you guys. Thanks.